Sofia had always thought that marriage would bring her happiness, warmth, and companionship. She had imagined mornings filled with laughter, evenings where they would talk about their day, and a life where she and her husband, Daniel, would face challenges together. But reality had turned out to be starkly different. Every day, she felt as if she was living in the shadow of someone she once loved deeply, yet who now seemed indifferent to her existence. From the very beginning, subtle signs had indicated that Daniel's attention and affection were slipping away. At first, it was the small things. He would forget to ask how her day had been or would be absorbed in his phone, scrolling endlessly while she tried to share her thoughts. She brushed it off, telling herself that everyone has busy days. But as months passed, the distance grew, and the warmth that had once been a part of their relationship seemed to vanish entirely. Sofia tried everything she could think of to reconnect. She planned dinners, suggested weekend trips, and even tried to dress up and make herself appealing, hoping to rekindle the spark they once had. Daniel, however, remained distant. He would nod politely, give short responses, and avoid eye contact. It wasn't that he was openly cruel or angry, it was far worse, he acted as though she were invisible. That invisibility was what cut the deepest, because it meant he no longer saw her as a partner, as someone important in his life. She spent countless nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, questioning herself. Was it something she had done wrong? Had she failed as a wife? She remembered how, in the beginning, Daniel would smile when she walked into the room, how he would tell her that her presence made his day better. Those memories now felt like a distant dream, almost unreal. The silence between them had grown so heavy that it felt suffocating. She often tried to speak about her feelings, but he would dismiss her concerns lightly, sometimes laughing them off or claiming she was overthinking things. The lack of emotional connection affected Sofia deeply. She stopped sharing her thoughts freely, stopped expecting warmth, and began living in a constant state of anticipation of yet another day where she would feel invisible. Her friends noticed the change in her, commenting on how quiet she had become, how her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Even her own family expressed concern, sensing the sadness in her voice during phone calls. But Sofia felt trapped, caught in a web of routine and obligations. Divorce or confrontation seemed impossible because of the social expectations, the fear of judgment, and the faint hope that things might change. One evening, she decided to confront Daniel, hoping that an honest conversation might awaken some awareness in him. She sat him down in the living room, her heart racing, her hands trembling slightly. "Daniel, I feel invisible in this marriage. I feel like I am nothing to you. You don't notice me, you don't talk to me, and it feels like I don't exist in your life anymore." He looked at her, his expression unreadable, and after a pause, he simply said, "I'm busy, Sofia. I don't know what you want me to do." The words hit her harder than any anger could have. It wasn't that he refused to change, it was that he refused to care enough to try. Sofia felt her chest tighten. She wanted to cry, to scream, to make him understand, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. After that night, she began observing the small moments more keenly, the way he would ignore her presence at the breakfast table, how he would leave the room when she entered, how he seemed more interested in his work or phone than in her. Each day was a reminder of her loneliness, each passing week. A testament to her insignificance in the person she had once considered her life partner. Sofia also noticed how her own self-esteem had begun to erode. She had spent so much energy trying to make him notice her, trying to be someone worthy of love in his eyes, that she had almost forgotten her own worth. The reflection in the mirror no longer seemed like the same confident woman she had been before marriage. Instead, she saw someone tired, anxious, and constantly questioning herself. She realized that she had been living for someone else so long that she had stopped living for herself. Yet, amidst the despair, there were moments of clarity. Sofia remembered her own passions, the things that had once made her happy, independent of Daniel. She recalled the sketches she used to make, the books she had loved to read, and the walks she used to take without worry. These small memories were sparks, reminders that she still existed as a person beyond the shadow of her husband's indifference. She started to take small steps to reclaim her life. She would wake up a little earlier to read her favorite book, go for a short walk in the park, or sit by the window with a cup of tea, simply enjoying the quiet. At first, it felt strange, almost selfish, to focus on herself when her marriage felt so empty. But slowly, she began to feel a subtle shift, a realization that her happiness did not have to depend entirely on someone else's attention or affection. Even though Daniel remained distant, Sofia started to find strength in her own presence. She began to write in her journal, capturing her thoughts and feelings honestly, without the need for validation. She would sometimes catch herself smiling at a memory or a small joy, and it reminded her that life was bigger than the walls of her home or the cold indifference of her husband. By the end of the episode, Sofia was still in a difficult position. The shadow of her husband's neglect still loomed large, and the pain of invisibility remained. Yet, within her, a seed of self-awareness and resilience had begun to grow. She understood, perhaps for the first time, that acknowledging her own emotions and needs was not selfish, it was necessary. Even in the quiet despair of her marriage, she was learning to see herself, to hear herself, and to exist for herself. And that, she realized, was the first step toward reclaiming the life she had almost forgotten she deserved. After months of feeling invisible in her own home, Sofia had come to a quiet but powerful realization: she could not continue to let her husband's indifference define her sense of self. The emptiness she felt had opened a door, not just to sadness, but to self-awareness. For the first time in years, she understood that her life did not need to revolve entirely around someone who refused to see her. It began with small steps. Sofia started waking up earlier than usual, giving herself time to focus on things that brought her genuine joy. She brewed her morning coffee slowly, savoring the aroma and warmth, and she sat by the window watching the sun rise. In those moments of silence, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was hers. She also revisited her old passions. Sofia had always loved painting, but in the whirlwind of marriage and attempts to earn her husband's attention, she had abandoned it. One afternoon, she dusted off her art supplies and sat at her small desk near the window. At first, her hands felt clumsy, her mind hesitant. But as the brush moved across the canvas, colors blending and shapes forming, she felt a rush of life returning to her. Each stroke reminded her that she was capable of creating, of expressing herself, and of valuing her own company. Encouraged by these moments, Sofia began taking more deliberate steps toward independence. She enrolled in an online course that had interested her for years. It was challenging, requiring her to set aside time and focus her mind, but she felt a sense of accomplishment with every lesson completed. More than the skills she was learning, it was the confidence she was building that mattered the most. She was no longer just existing in the shadow of someone else, she was actively investing in herself. Sofia also recognized the importance of boundaries. She realized that part of her pain had stemmed from allowing Daniel's indifference to affect her mood and sense of worth. She began to detach emotionally, observing his behavior without letting it define her feelings. When he ignored her or spoke to her without warmth, she reminded herself that his actions were about him, not her value. This shift in perspective was liberating. For the first time, she could interact with him without the constant anxiety of needing his approval or affection. Social connections, too, became a source of renewal. Sofia reached out to friends she had neglected, inviting them for coffee or walks. She found joy in shared laughter, in conversations where her thoughts and opinions mattered. These interactions reminded her that she was not invisible to everyone, only to someone who had chosen to ignore her. Rebuilding these connections strengthened her sense of self and gave her courage to face the challenges at home. One evening, as Sofia prepared dinner, she noticed the familiar distance in Daniel's demeanor. But instead of feeling the old pang of hurt, she felt calm. She realized that she no longer needed his attention to validate her existence. She could be present, do her part, and still retain her sense of self-worth. When he asked her a brief question or made a passing comment, she responded politely but without expectation. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She had learned that emotional freedom was not about changing him, it was about changing herself. Sofia also began to express herself more openly. She wrote in her journal every night, capturing her thoughts and emotions without filtering them. Sometimes, she wrote letters to Daniel she never intended to send, explaining how his neglect had affected her. The act of writing gave her clarity, transforming vague feelings of sadness into concrete understanding. She could see patterns, recognize moments when she had compromised herself, and envision ways to assert her needs more effectively. As her confidence grew, Sofia found herself thinking about her future with fresh eyes. She realized that she had options, ways to live her life authentically and fully, whether or not Daniel's behavior changed. She dreamed of traveling, of pursuing opportunities she had once dismissed as impossible, and of creating a life that brought her genuine joy. For the first time, she understood that happiness was not a prize to be won from someone else, it was a choice she could cultivate within herself. There were moments of doubt, of course. Some nights, the old feelings of sadness and loneliness resurfaced, threatening to undo her progress. But Sofia had learned to face them without fear. She acknowledged the pain, allowed herself to feel it, and then let it pass, reminding herself that her worth was not dependent on anyone's recognition. Each challenge became a lesson in resilience, each setback an opportunity to reaffirm her commitment to herself. One afternoon, she joined a local art group she had discovered online. Meeting other women who shared her passion, exchanging ideas, and receiving encouragement sparked something profound. She felt seen, appreciated, and respected, not because of what she could do for someone else, but simply because she existed. This experience reinforced her belief that validation could come from healthy, supportive environments rather than the indifference of a spouse. Sofia also began to explore her inner strength in subtle but meaningful ways. She spoke up in situations where she would have previously stayed silent, expressed her opinions even if they differed from others, and made decisions that reflected her own desires rather than deferring to Daniel. These actions, though small in isolation, collectively reshaped her sense of identity. She was no longer just a wife living in the background, she was a woman with agency, choices, and a voice that deserved to be heard. By the end of the episode, Sofia had transformed. While her marriage had not yet changed, and Daniel remained largely the same, she no longer allowed his indifference to define her happiness. She had discovered her own strength, reclaimed her passions, and learned to prioritize herself. Her life was no longer a shadowed existence but a journey she was actively shaping. In finding her own voice, Sofia had not only reclaimed her sense of self, she had also ignited a spark of hope, courage, and independence that promised a brighter future, one where she could finally be seen and valued, first and foremost, by herself.